Good evening, everyone. I am Jessa Esmohelio, your second reporter for today. I will discuss the continuation of Chapter 6, Learners with Additional Needs. I need your eyes and ears to watch and listen my discussion for today's video. Part 2, Learners with Difficulty Seeing. Its definition: students in the classroom will exhibit different levels of clarity of eyesight or visual acuity. So what do you mean by visual acuity? Visual acuity is a measure of the ability of the eye to distinguish shapes and the details of objects at a given distance. It is important to assess visual acuity in a consistent way in order to detect any changes in vision. There may be some students with hampered or restricted vision. Learners with difficulty seeing are those with issues regarding sight that interfere with academics. The definition from Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, states that an impairment in vision that, even with correction, adversely affects a child's educational performance, which includes both partial sight and blindness. These students may need to have their eyesight corrected by wearing glasses or other optical devices. Next is their identification. Learners with difficulty seeing often have physical signs such as crossed eyes, squinting, and eyes that turns outwards. They may also be clumsy, usually bumping into objects which cause them to fall down. They like to sit near the instructional materials or at times would stand up and go near the visual aids. So learners with difficulty seeing may also show poor eye-hand coordination. This can be seen in their handwriting or poor performance in sporting activities. Another indication is poor academic performance, as these students might have reading as well as writing. Next is learning characteristics. Good visual ability is critical in learning. Most school lessons are done through blackboard writing, presentations, or handouts in most major subjects. Visual impairments, whether mild, moderate, or severe, affect the student's ability to participate in normal classroom activities. In the past, students who are visually impaired are placed in special institutions. And nowadays, most are enrolled with other children who are not visually impaired. So learners with difficulty seeing have restricted ways to learn incidentally from their surroundings, since most of them learn through visual clues. Because of this, the other senses are used to acquire knowledge. Due to the limited ability to explore the environment, low motivation to discover is present. And the next is general educational adaptations. Modification in teaching is needed to accommodate students with difficulty seeing. The following strategies may be considered. If the use of books is part of your lesson, students with difficulty seeing should be informed ahead of time so that they can be ordered in braille or in an audio recorder format. Portions of textbooks and other printed materials may be recorded so that visually impaired students can be listened instead of focusing on visual presentation. All words written on the board should be read clearly. Students with difficulty seeing should be seated near the board so that they can easily move close to the instructional materials used during lesson. A body can be assigned to a student with difficulty seeing as needed. This can be crucial to assist in the mobility of the student, such as going to the other places in school during the day. And students with difficulty seeing might need more time to complex a test or homework. This might be on a case-to-case basis. Teachers should be aware if terminology that would require visual acuity, such as over there or like this one, which the impaired student may be not possess. Teachers should also monitor the students closely to know who needs extra time in completing tasks. So all of these adaptations is a big help for learners with difficulty seeing. And as an educator, I would adapt my classroom for learners with difficulty seeing by trying to minimize noise and disturbances in the classroom as the learner relies on verbal instruction and information. Encourage them to take responsibility for reminding his or her teacher when support is needed. Let different classmates take turns in pairing for assistance if necessary. So now, let's move on to part 3, which is learners with difficulty hearing. Its definition, this refers to students with an issue regarding hearing that interferes with academics. The definition from Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or IDEA defines it as an impairment in hearing, whether permanent or fluctuating, that adversely affects a child's educational performance but is not included under the definition of deafness. Deafness is considered when hearing loss is above 90 decibels. A hearing loss below 90 decibels is called hearing impairment. So the main challenge of hearing impaired students is communication, since most of them have varying ways of communicating. The factors affecting the development of communication skills include intelligence, personality, the degree and nature of deafness and residual hearing, the family environment, and the age of onset. The latter plays the most crucial role in the development of language, as those who have hearing loss present at birth are more functionally disabled than those who lose hearing after language and speech development. So next is its identification. To identify learners with difficulty hearing, observe a student and see if he or she does the following items below: speaking loudly, positioning ear toward the direction of the one speaking, asking for information to be repeated again and again, delayed development of speech, watching the face of the speaker intently, favoring one ear, not responding when called, has difficulty following directions, does not mind loud noises, leaning close to the source of sounds. So with regular exposure to loud sounds and general carelessness, noise-induced hearing loss is a real danger to children and teens. Knowing the symptoms of hearing loss can keep teachers vigilant when a student starts underperforming at school, and it's important a child receives treatment for their hearing loss as soon as it's noticed. Hearing loss can severely impact a child's cognitive development and learning ability, not to mention make them confused and angry. So as what I've said earlier, in the following items, we can easily identify learners with difficulty hearing. Next is learning characteristics. Since much of learning is acquired through hearing, students with hearing problems have deficiencies in language and in their experiences. Since they may miss out on daily conversations, they may miss crucial information that non-hearing impaired students learn incidentally. Students may overcome these problems by investing time, energy, and combined effort by both parents and educators. So most learners with difficulty hearing use various methods of communication. The most common is the use of hearing aids combined with lip reading. These students are referred to as oral since they can communicate through speech as opposed to sign language. They might have delayed communication skills since the development of vocabulary is slower. They understand concepts when the sentence structure is simpler. Interacting with students can be a challenge, so they prefer to work on their own. Some hearing impaired students use note takers in class since it is difficult to lip read and take notes simultaneously. The next is general educational adaptations. There is an assumption that the only adjustment for hearing impaired students is to make all instructional materials and techniques in written format. These are other ways to adapt to hearing impaired students. First, teachers should help students with difficulty hearing to use the residual hearing they may have. Teachers should help students develop the ability for speech, reading or watching others' lips, mouth, and expressions. Teachers should be mindful to face the class at all times when presenting information while ensuring that the students with difficulty hearing sit near them. Exaggerating the pronunciation of words should not be done, for it just makes it difficult for the students with difficulty hearing. Directions, as well as important parts of the lesson, should always be written on the board. Written or pictorial directions instead of verbal directions may be given. Steps to an activity may be physically acted out instead of verbally given. A variety of multisensory activities should be given to allow the students to focus on their learning strengths. And teachers also should be more patient when waiting to hear a response from a hearing impaired student, which may take longer than usual. So these educational adaptations is very important and big help for those learners with difficulty hearing. So as an educator, I'll help by encouraging them to sit themselves toward the front of the lecture theater where they will have an unobstructed line of vision. This is particularly important if the student is using an interpreter, lip reading, relying on visual clues, or using a hearing aid which has a limited range. And also be aware that some students may not be comfortable with this suggestion or have alternate strategies. Respect their choices. Use assistive listening devices such as induction loops if these are available in the lecture theater. Hearing aids may include transmitter or receiver systems with a clip-on microphone for the lecturer. If using such a microphone, it is not necessary to change your speaking or teaching style. And ensure that any background noise is minimized, and repeat clearly any questions asked by students in the lecture or class before giving a response. So these are all in my part. Thank you for watching.